Thanks for tuning in for another session of Back Porch Catechetics. This video focuses on Catechism of the Catholic Church 2450 to 2463, the in brief section that reviews the seventh commandment, you shall not steal. As a quick overview for the commandments, I think it's helpful to review all 10 in a row. We can give them the quick formulation, I am the Lord your God. There is one God, you shall have no false gods before me, therefore you shall love the Lord. In the second commandment, we're told to keep holy the name of the Lord, and in the third, to keep holy the Sabbath. And you remember the first three are often grouped together as they refer to loving God. The fourth through the 10th are then grouped together in that they love your neighbor, they love others. Honor your father and mother. You shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery, and you shall not steal, gets us to the 7th. Of course, we know the 8th, you shall not bear false witness, not covet a neighbor's wife, and not covet your neighbor's good. Well, if the first three are separated from the remaining 7 by love God and love neighbor, we also remember that honoring your father and mother is included in the first 3. All 4 of these have the form of do this, or you shall, whereas the remaining 6, 5 through 10, have that form, you shall not. All right, so the 7th commandment is firmly in the context of how to love your neighbor, and it also has the basic form of you shall not. It prohibits something. So there's the first round sense of this commandment that we really should not take from others. I think that's probably the heart of stealing. What makes it wrong is to take. And so effectively we're saying, do not take. But the flip side of that would be something like, well, perhaps you should give. And it's also going to allow something like you should receive. Again, the basic form, you should not take. Now, natural law strongly suggests that this is really part of the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And you'll remember a fair amount of the Decalogue is not exclusively revealed in the sense that we would not know it apart from unaided human reason or just consulting the natural law. So we have this sense of do not take, or you shall not steal, do not steal. And under natural law, that makes a lot of sense. Remember, natural law is the law that we would derive within nature in the sense of created nature. It's not simply limited to something like modern physics observations about falling objects and gravity. That is a natural law. But we're also talking about natural moral type laws, how humans should act. And there's a basic, do unto others that fits here. Easy enough. You don't want people to steal from you, therefore you should not steal from other people. We don't want people to take our stuff, and therefore we should not take other people's stuff. In the revealed law, though, we get a deeper sense of why we should not steal or what's at stake here. In the Old Testament, this is clearly tied to the sense in which God entrusts creation to the male and female created in his image. And so we have to go back to the Genesis 1, where God creates man in his image, male and female, he creates them. And he says to them, have dominion over the earth. Subdue it and care for it. So that sense of dominion and care is really at the heart of what's revealed here, because effectively God is saying, I have given you, right? So God gives to us, and that means we receive. Again, this is the 7th commandment, and we're seeing a rationale for its dynamic. We're seeing what's revealed about the 7th commandment in Genesis 1. And it seems to be really rooted in that cycle of blessing. God gives it to us and we receive. Now, this helps us make sense of the do not take. That's precisely what Eve does in Genesis 3 in the fall. Eve, it says, took the fruit. And so again, that taking is what you're told not to do. But giving and receiving, well, that's the pattern that God establishes initially in creating. In Genesis 1, he gives creation. He gives the garden to the male and female. In Genesis 2, we have a similar sense. God creates that garden for the Adam, for the human, and then tinkers with it until creation is complete. Now, it's not the ancient language here, but I think the modern language of property rights is included in this thought process or comes along with it. The basic idea, I think, for both Jews and Christians is that God creates a universe and a human society in which there's some sense of stability in caring for and stewardship for this dominion, this leadership over. And that can include that, this person might be directly responsible for this piece of land or for this animal. And well, that's very much what we envision in the garden, right? That Adam and Eve are working in the garden. They have their fruits that they can eat. It's just a very beautiful image in that sense, but it has stability in it. It's not like you would expect Eve to be able to take something from Adam or Adam to take something from Eve. And so we meditate on this sense of what modern property rights are meant to uphold. And it seems that at their heart, modern property rights is a sort of reflection upon or translation of this point. So we might say in modern language, the ancient Genesis account is really trying to tell us there are such a thing as stable property rights. So the seventh commandment in forbidding theft, seems to rely on a sense of justice, which includes you can be responsible for something and no one can take that from you, as well as charity, which indicates that you ought to give to others in need. You ought to help them as much as you can. And so we'd say the seventh commandment forbids theft, and that means it upholds justice and charity. And in that sense, forbids theft, upholds, we'd put justice and charity here. And those involve admitting that different people can be responsible for different things. We have to honor that, but that's a gift. And so if I find myself having more or having something that someone else needs, I ought to be like God. I ought to be in God's image and give that to others, share that with others. Now, there's an alternative religious thought about this. The alternative thought would claim that we're really looking at like a spiritual or heavenly goods versus material goods. And so you might try to set up this system of like spiritual versus material. And in that alternative religious system, it's like, well, the spiritual is good, the material is bad. And so, well, a prohibition against stealing, that would not apply to material things because material things are bad. Take whatever you want. Nobody owns anything, or material stuff doesn't matter. You can't take your boat to heaven. Those kinds of reflections, which attempt to pit spiritual versus material, I think, they're tempting sometimes, but they're really denigrating earthly or temporal goods. And part of what's kind of premised in the do not take, do not steal commandment is that those earthly or temporal goods are actually goods, right? It is good for us to have a garden, a place where we can eat and work and live, and we should not denigrate that reality. Similarly, there are theories that also claim to be based on religious beliefs, or maybe that are other religions, that would claim that no human person can own other things. Rather, all things, belong to all things, or all things belong to the community. That seems to be not part of what's in, this seventh commandment. You cannot steal. It's like, what's a requirement for stealing? A requirement for stealing is that someone else has something, right? You should not take it from them means that, well, they have it. And so those basic religious assumptions which say something like, well, no one owns anything anyway, seem to have a different set of assumptions than the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, and the Jewish Christian thought world. Right, so the seventh commandment speaks against that kind of an alternative religion simply by assuming something like the existence of personal property rights and ownership, responsibility, personal responsibility. But notice that the Catechism tempers this language by arguing that some goods exist for all humans, or that all humans have a claim to things that sustain life and human dignity. So, have dominion over the earth, care for it, does not mean that one person could own it all, or, that Adam could take it all and leave Eve to starve, or alternatively, that Eve could take it all and leave Adam to starve. And in fact, it's really in this taking and giving, I think, that we can get a deeper understanding of why the fall is such a failure. Eve takes the fruit that she's not supposed to take, right? And so there's the taking, which is wrong, you shall not take. But then what she gives to Adam is not for his own benefit, right? So it's a perversion of what she should be doing. She should be gathering this food from her garden and sharing it to nourish Adam. And instead of gathering to nourish, she takes to Adam's detriment. She takes and gives it to Adam's own failure. And of course, he takes it as well. He takes it from God in the sense that it's forbidden fruit, and he takes it from Eve in a negative sense. He knows he's sharing in her taking. Right, so there are property ownership rights or something like them envisioned in the system, but they're not absolute in the sense of one person obviously could not gain everything or own everything. There's another way of getting at that the Catechism employs, and that's to think not from the perspective of like, could one person gain everything, but to think about what each person needs. So there's an upholding everyone's dignity and a recognition that some things, like perhaps air and water, people need those things to survive. And so I do not have something like dominion over all of the air to the exclusion of your life. Again, if we needed to order those in the Ten Commandments, we could remember that we've already been prohibited to kill. And so even if not stealing says it's okay for you to own some things, clearly I could not own everything, all the air, in a way that would prevent or enable me to kill people. You get the point that these kind of fit together. And perhaps if we get too far out of line, a different wording or articulation of the law can help us. All right, so a traditional understanding of the seventh commandment then balances use of common goods in such a way as to forbid me from owning every last drop of water. But it would still allow me to own some water because I need water for my own life, my own thriving, and my own nourishment. Let's think a little bit more about what's wrong directly with theft. We've already said that it's a taking, and that's a taking which is opposed to receiving. And this gives us a puzzle sometimes because there are many things which I could have if someone gives them to me, but which I could not take from someone else. This shows up in all kinds of exchanges. It's not that it's wrong for me to have this thing, but I cannot take it without you knowing it, or I cannot have it without you giving it to me. And so there's a sense in which thou shalt not steal does not necessarily apply to things, but it also includes, or maybe more directly applies to the manner of exchange. So you can have stuff, it upholds property rights, or you have dominion, you have care of the world, but maybe it's not so much about the world in first place as it is really about the relationship between the two parties involved here. Right? There's several things which I could have if someone gives them to me, but which I should not take from someone else. So this includes intention and understanding in the analysis of a human act. And that's a theme that we've seen before in the Catechism when we're thinking of like virtue and how to make sense of human actions, as well as how to make sense of cooperation between divine grace and human agencies. If you wanted to think of a modern parallel here, I think, at least in our context, tax policy is sensitive to this distinction. Right? Like if we agree as a society that each of us should offer this or that amount, all of us agree this is what we should do, then we're not taking it from other people. We're all agreeing to give it. But then we see that tax policy is, well, in a large democracy, it sometimes gets a little dicey because it can feel like we're actually taking, not allowing people to give. And so there's a fine line there for how this might play out at large in a society. We want to be sensitive to the idea that the seventh commandment is really telling us, do not take, but allow people to give and allow yourself to receive. Uphold justice, but be charitable with what you have. Right, there are some specific atrocities which have happened in my own culture in the United States, but around the world and have existed forever, and that's slavery, which end up being prohibited by the seventh commandment. Now, what's wrong with slavery includes a long list of things. I don't think anyone would want to say it could be reduced simply to the seventh commandment. But there's a deep meditation on like, if you understand why taking from someone else is wrong, if you understand that theft is wrong, you shall not steal, then you understand slavery is wrong, because what you're taking from someone else is their ability to work for themselves. What you're taking away from someone else is his ability to be free and to reap the rewards of his own actions. And so that there's a stealing involved in slavery. It's a way for the rich or the powerful to steal from the poor or the weak, to steal their labor, to steal their ideas, to steal their freedom. Again, slavery is wrong for many reasons. One of them is that it would go against the seventh commandment. And here we come up against a real paradox, because natural law, pretty normally says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so natural law would forbid slavery, right? I mean, I do not want to be enslaved, and so why should I enslave someone else? I do not want people to take from me all of my wages. Why should I do it to someone else? Well, I mean, it's not always clear in a post-lapsarian world that people will follow the natural law. It's not always clear that people will be reasonable. We will do horrible things to each other when given the chance, as witnessed by human history. And so perhaps it's a really good thing that we do have this revealed law where God tells us, look, if you're ever puzzled about whether it's right to take something from someone else, the clear answer is no, it's not right. If you're ever puzzled about whether it makes sense to enslave someone else and steal from her all of her wages, all of her freedom, well, the answer is that's not right. So even when civil law speaks against natural or moral law, or even when we're clouded about what natural law says on this issue, we still have the revealed law and the seventh commandment saying, do not do it. There's never a situation in which stealing is legitimate. Now, when we're talking about, stealing law stealing labor or stealing wages, stealing things from other people, or even stealing freedom or liberty from other people, we have to separate stealing those things from the goodness of work or labor. And so just as we were saying, there's some people that try to do this, and that's a false distinction. There's some people who try to say, well, all work is bad. And that would be an alternative religious view to the Judeo-Christian reflection that comes out of the seventh commandment. It's like, look, if it's wrong to take something from someone else, it's right for someone else to work for something, right? Like, it's good to do work. It's good to be productive. And this makes us think back again at Genesis 3, where Eve takes the fruit, but then there's the classic punishment. And in the punishment that God gives to Adam, he says, "Cursed be the ground because of you. In toil shall you eat its yield all the days of your life." So, well, work is bad. No. That's not what we're saying. We're saying work is good. But after the fall, work is difficult. Well, work is work, right? Work is difficult. Work is toil. Right, so it's not the work that's bad. It's that now that we've fallen, now that we've taken instead of received, it's only by the sweat of our face that we should get bread to eat. We have to work against ourselves. We have to work against nature. We have to struggle in order to receive what we should normally get, or to have that harmony between ourselves and our neighbor, and between ourselves and the created world around us. Right? So feeding and clothing those who are without, this is what we're called to do. That's charity. And well, that has to involve that we work and build things and participate in creation. Inasmuch as giving is the opposite of taking, the prohibition on taking can be understood as an endorsement of giving. So again, we have to respect what other people are doing. We have to respect their own autonomy and their own ability to work towards their betterment. We have to allow for abundance. That's nothing that we take from other people. But when we are in a cycle of abundance, then we need to be in the image of God and give to allow others to receive. And when we are needy, we should not take, but in fact, we should be ready to receive. We should participate in both sides of love, of charity. If we rephrase, the "thou shalt not steal" into a positive endorsement, it looks like this is an endorsement, actually, of giving alms, an endorsement of taking care of the poor and the needy.